It begins with a ghost, a whisper on decaying paper, cataloged not by name, but by number. Subject number 129, a young mother admitted for anxiety, who emerged a blank slate. Her file, a shallow grave dug in a manila folder, is just one of thousands. This is the story of Project MKUltra, the CIA's top-secret program to master the art of mind control. Gripped by Cold War paranoia and a terrifying new concept called brainwashing, the agency declared a secret war on the human psyche itself. They deployed LSD, extreme electroshock, and hypnosis on unwitting citizens, prisoners, patients, and ordinary people lured into secret labs. Their goal: to build a weapon that could dismantle a human being. But when the program risked exposure, the agency turned on itself, committing an act of historical arson by burning nearly every file to ash. What happens when a government decides its own citizens are neurological territory to be conquered? And when the evidence is turned to smoke, how do we hunt the ghosts they tried to erase? The hunt for these ghosts begins not with a seance, but with a history lesson. It begins in the early 1950s. The Iron Curtain had descended, and the Red Scare was at a fever pitch. The catalyst was the Korean War. When American GIs were captured and paraded before cameras, they delivered chillingly convincing confessions to fantastic crimes like germ warfare. The press gave this a name that would forever haunt the American imagination: brainwashing. It suggested a terrifying new Soviet science that could hollow out a man's soul. For Allen Dulles, the newly appointed Director of Central Intelligence, this was a declaration of a new kind of war. A patrician spy master, Dulles saw the Cold War as an absolute struggle between good and evil. He believed the Soviets had developed techniques to eradicate human will, and that America was catastrophically behind. This fear became a foundational paranoia within the CIA: find a defense, and more importantly, a corresponding offense. Into this vortex stepped Sidney Gottlieb. A brilliant chemist with a PhD from Caltech, Gottlieb was a paradox, a stuttering, club-footed man who lived a Spartan life raising goats. But within the CIA, he was a dark visionary, chosen to architect America's response. His logic was as simple as it was monstrous. To defeat the enemy's weapon, we had to build it first. The CIA had to become the world's foremost expert in mind control. On April 13, 1953, Allan Dulles signed a memorandum authorizing a new program, codenamed MKUltra. Its charter was a masterpiece of antiseptic bureaucracy, authorizing the research and development of chemical, biological, and radiological materials capable of employment in clandestine operations to control human behavior. This was not a government document. It was a license for Sidney Gottlieb to wage war on the fabric of human consciousness, using unwitting citizens as his subjects. Once authorized, MKUltra moved from paranoia to operational reality. Gottlieb was granted 6% of the CIA's entire budget with almost no oversight. He investigated everything from hypnosis to paralytic agents, but the project's dark heart soon fixed upon a single terrifying substance: lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD. Under Sub-Project 68, the CIA moved to corner the world market, purchasing the entire global supply from Sandoz Laboratories in Switzerland. They believed they had found their holy grail, a chemical that could dissolve the ego and render a mind pliable. The only question was how to weaponize it. The proving grounds were the forgotten corners of American society. The program's architects required subjects who could not fight back. They found them in federal penitentiaries, in state-run mental hospitals, and on the streets of America's great cities. This led to Operation Midnight Climax. In New York and San Francisco, the CIA established safe houses, apartments meticulously designed as both boudoirs and laboratories. They hired prostitutes, putting them on the federal payroll to lure unsuspecting men back to these apartments where their drinks would be laced with LSD. On the other side of a two-way mirror, agency men sat with notepads and cocktails, clinically documenting as their subjects' minds unraveled. It was a squalid, secret theater of cruelty. The depravity reached its apex under the guise of legitimate science. At the Allan Memorial Institute in Montreal, the renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Ewen Cameron, was pursuing his own radical theories. Cameron believed that to cure a sick mind, one first had to erase it completely, a process he called depatterning. Through a CIA front group, Gottlieb funneled tens of thousands of dollars to Cameron, enabling him to transform his hospital ward into a personal fiefdom of psychological destruction. Patients admitted for minor conditions like anxiety were subjected to weeks of electroshock therapy at 30 to 40 times the normal voltage, plunged into drug-induced comas for months, and forced to listen to looped audio recordings for up to 16 hours a day. And woven through it all were massive doses of LSD. Cameron wasn't healing his patients, he was annihilating their personalities. For a time, the architects of MKUltra believed they were insulated from the chaos. But in November 1953, the experiment turned inward. At a remote CIA retreat, Sidney Gottlieb spiked a bottle of Cointreau with LSD, dosing a group of his own colleagues. One of them was Dr. Frank Olson, a 43-year-old Army biochemist. In the days that followed, Olson descended into severe paranoia. 9 days after being drugged, in the early hours of November 28th, Frank Olson crashed through the closed window of his 10th floor hotel room and plunged to his death. It was the program's first, undeniable fatality, a ghost in their own machine. By 1973, the Watergate scandal was metastasizing, dissolving public trust in government. A reckoning was coming. Director Richard Helms, the consummate company man, understood the threat. Buried in the agency's family jewels of indefensible operations was MKUltra. Its exposure would be an apocalypse. In early 1973, Helms gave a verbal order: destroy every file related to MKUltra. What followed was a frantic act of erasure. In the bowels of the agency, thousands of pages, over 2 decades, of clinical notes, surveillance logs, and financial authorizations were fed into shredders, a criminal conspiracy to incinerate the program's very existence. But in the panicked rush, a critical error was made. While the operational files were destroyed, a cache of some 8,000 pages of financial records had been misfiled years earlier. They did not contain the horrifying details of the experiments, but something more damning: the cold, hard proof. They were the ledgers of sin, the breadcrumbs connecting the CIA's coffers to specific doctors, universities, and research institutions. The body of the crime had been cremated, but its financial skeleton remained. In December 1974, journalist Seymour Hersh published a bombshell exposé in The New York Times, alleging massive, illegal CIA operations against American citizens. The fuse was lit. Congress convened its own investigation, the Church Committee, armed with subpoena power to hunt down what its chairman called the rogue elephant on the loose. Investigators knew something monstrous had happened, but the evidence was gone. Then they found the misfiled financial records. This was their Rosetta Stone. It provided a roadmap of the conspiracy, proving the program's vast scope and pointing towards the men and institutions involved. And in this newly unearthed lexicon of cruelty, one name resurfaced: Frank Olson. For 22 years, his family had been told he suffered a nervous breakdown and committed suicide. Armed with the new revelations, they pushed back. The CIA was finally forced to admit the horrifying truth. Olson had been an unwitting subject, dosed with LSD, and had plunged to his death in a state of drug-induced terror. The first crack in the wall had widened into a chasm. The partial revelations were like tremors from an earthquake. In 1975, to contain the fallout, President Gerald Ford invited the Olson family to the Oval Office and offered a formal apology on behalf of the United States. It was a stunning, unprecedented moment, but it was also a carefully calibrated act of containment. An apology for a single death, not for the suffering of thousands. True accountability would prove to be a mirage. Richard Helms, who ordered the files destroyed, claimed he couldn't recall specifics. Sidney Gottlieb, the poisoner-in-chief, was granted full immunity from prosecution in exchange for his testimony. Dr. Ewen Cameron had died in 1967. In the end, not a single person was ever convicted for the design, execution, or cover-up of Project MKUltra. The system had investigated itself and found no one to blame. The ghosts, however, would not be exorcised. In Canada, Dr. Cameron's survivors, their lives shattered, sued the CIA. After nearly a decade, the agency settled, paying out damages in exchange for silence. This became the template, a quiet settlement, a non-disclosure agreement. The true number of victims remains, by design, unknown. The revelations did lead to reforms, like the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978, a legal wall built to prevent the shadows from ever again creeping so far into the light. But it was a wall built on ashes, leaving a question that echoes in the silence of the archives. How can we be certain this shadow doctrine is truly a thing of the past, when the tools of control are more sophisticated, and the mechanisms of erasure are now instantaneous? MKUltra's architects believed they could turn truth to smoke and ash. They were wrong. The evidence of their crimes survived because of a misfiled folder, a persistent journalist, and families who refused to be silenced. This story survives today for one reason: because we refuse to let it be forgotten. The act of remembering is an act of defiance. If you believe this history must be remembered, help us ensure it is never erased by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. The file on MKUltra is closed, but the archives are full of secrets. To be there when we open the next one, click the notification bell. Join us as we continue the hunt.